Hello, everyone. Hope you all are having a great time with the sessions. I'm Vanita from Customer Relationship Team for Serverless 360 products. Today, I'm privileged to introduce Kent Weare and Sarah Critchley. Kent Weare is a business applications MVP and an experienced leader who possesses strong technical skills, passionate about architecture with a specializing in integration. And Sarah Critchley is also an business application MVP. She gets involved in the technical community through running several technical events and presenting technical and functional topics at conferences around the world. Today they are going to speak about Microsoft Flow. Please welcome Kent and Sarah.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for sticking with us. I know this is the most coveted speaker spot, other than perhaps the very last one at the end of the conference, Wagner. But drinks are served after, not before, so we're good. We still have some time. So as discussed, my name is Kent Weare, and I'm joined by
Sarah Critchley. Hi, everyone.
And so we're filling in for John Levesque from the Microsoft Flow product group. He unfortunately had an issue with his back after moving recently, and so we're here to try and step in for him. Now, what we're going to do today is talk about Microsoft Flow. And earlier in the day, it was mentioned that when you create a flow, underneath the hood, you're actually creating a logic app. So obviously, there's going to be some shared capabilities, but the purpose of this session is not to get into those shared capabilities. We want to focus on what makes Flow unique. So before we go too far into Flow, who's heard of Microsoft Flow before today? And then who's used it? Okay, cool. Quite a few. So that's great. So this morning we heard from 3 different organizations, all going through some level of transformation, whether it's retail, banking, or energy. Now, for all of these organizations, they're looking for additional agility, and they're obviously encountering more competition, whether it be incumbents or new faces in the market itself. And so what we want to talk about today is this notion of people and how by using democratized technology, you can actually become more competitive through scaling. And you're scaling through people is one of those angles. Now, this is a slide from Gartner, and I think Richard Schroeder's talked a little bit about this in the past. And it's this notion of introducing the citizen integrator, or what was discussed this morning, the citizen automator. And the whole idea is that more and more workflows or integrations are actually developed outside your center of excellence integration shops. Now, this might be a little bit contentious for this audience here, but this is the reality. It's something that I'm seeing every day at the place where I work. And now what's driving this is really people. And I think if you think about innovation, innovation doesn't occur while standing in line, waiting for a smaller group of experts that are then able to fulfill your needs or your requirements. And so by actually using democratized technology, we have the ability to scale. And this comes essentially through diversity. And diversity comes in many different forms. It can be your job function, where you're now collaborating with someone who's probably closer to the business problem. It's also like diversity of thought, where people bring different perspectives, and collectively you're able to focus on an outcome. And now this does take a bit of a mind shift in order to achieve. I think for many of us in the room at your organization, you're probably one of the most technical person or the strongest technically. And it does take force you to take a step back and say, what is right for the collective organization? And how can we actually involve more people in order to drive some sort of an outcome? And I think when you look at the technology landscape that exists today, there's never been an opportunity like now in order for organizations to scale. And this comes through like a lower barrier of entry for technology. And one of those technology sets is the Power Platform, which includes Microsoft Flow, Power Apps, and Power BI. And for those of you that have seen the growth of Power BI a couple years ago, I think now organizations are starting to see this explosive growth around Power Apps and Flow, because it allows organizations to achieve similar results. Instead of analytics, it's more on this ability to be app makers or flow makers. And lastly, with this technology in the past, this has been a major concern for organizations because they're afraid of data leakage. And it doesn't have to be a great concern. Naturally, you have the ability to use your organizational accounts in order to build these assets and then actually leverage governance that is provided by Microsoft in order to see what your users are doing. So this is a strong contrast to perhaps some other technologies like Zapier or IFT, where you as an enterprise have pretty much zero visibility in terms of what your users are doing. Now, what does this mean? What are the tangible results of using the Power Platform? So this was a study that was conducted by Forrester, commissioned by Microsoft, so fully transparent there. But as you can see, the results were impressive. So of organizations that participated, on average, they saw 70% less development cost and effort by leveraging this low-code, no-code approach. From a return on investment perspective, organizations were seeing 362% over a 3-year term. Now, when you go ahead and look at the history of IT projects, there's not a great track record for projects being on time, on budget, and actually delivering on the promises that the business was expecting. But using this type of technology set gives you the ability to do that. And part of it is you also have the short time to delivery. So 3 months, less than 3 months payback, that means that you're not spending a whole lot of time developing these solutions, and they're providing value as well. Now, some of the other product groups have shown similar slides, talking about their numbers. So this number represents what Flow is seeing itself, Microsoft Flow. So over 1.3 monthly active users every single month. Over 200,000 organizations are using Power Apps and Flow worldwide across 200 different countries. And now the whole core tenet of the Microsoft Flow team is allow people to work smarter by automating process across their apps and data. Now, with Microsoft Flow, you're not going to access the Azure portal, even though underneath the hood you are provisioning a Logic app. And so you can think of this more as integration software as a service, where there is a portal experience available that will look and feel familiar to Logic apps. The difference is you're not running it in the same subscription as the rest of your Azure Logic apps. And there's also abstractions that are put in place in order to lower that barrier of entry for some of those citizen automators or citizen developers. Flow is also a global scale SaaS that supports your digital transformation needs. Now, it doesn't have quite the reach that Logic Apps itself does, but as you can see, it is in many regions across many jurisdictions, so there's a high probability that one of those regions will work for you.
Thank you so much, Kent, for that. So Dynamics 365, right? So we've got marketing, finance, service. There's so many apps that Dynamics 365 brings to the table. Pre-built, packaged applications that are managed by Microsoft, which is the key word here. They're managed by Microsoft. Organizations can essentially go ahead and license these applications and get started with them straight away. There is no customization required or even necessary. And these applications are huge. You do get what you pay for within these applications. And there's over 12 applications within the Dynamics 365 family now, and that is just going to continue growing, right? So surrounding Dynamics 365 is data and intelligence, which can be quite kind of, what do they actually mean, right? It's quite subjective. I mean, in relation to your data from an organization perspective, the great thing in relation to Dynamics 365 is that data is actually unified across all of those applications. They all utilize the common data service for apps. And on top of that, and what's actually quite unique and special about Dynamics 365 applications is they've got embedded intelligence. There's been some fantastic presentations today about using machine learning and using Python and using other languages to actually go ahead and look into data and get more insights and predictions on that. But what Dynamics 365 applications do is they have that embedded already. There's no competition between them. They're both still perfectly valid options, but this is what it brings from an organizational perspective. It allows them to get started with intelligence straight away. And of course, it's built on the Power Platform, as Kent was saying earlier. Now, Flow is such an important part. It's an integral part of the Power Platform. How I normally describe this to my customers is it's like the engine of a car. You can't really go anywhere without an engine, right? From a journey perspective, all organizations subscribe to a journey when it comes to digital transformation. And I know that sounds quite cushy and fluffy. I appreciate that for sure. Like kind of, okay, you've said digital transformation, I've got a little tick in a box. But genuinely, this is real digital transformation. And to subscribe to that, you need an automation engine. And Flow is that integral automation engine to the Power Platform. Of course, Flow isn't on its own in the Power Platform. You've got Power BI from a data and analytics perspective to be able to visualize that data across the organization. And obviously, you've also got Power Apps. Now, with Power Apps, it's not, you've got Canvas apps, you've got two different types of applications, just briefly put. Canvas apps, where you can actually create essentially pixel-perfect applications. You design the UI. You can connect to multiple different data sources very, very easily using the connectors available. And you've also got model-driven apps that have the interface already built for you using the unified interface. And it's built on a common data service for apps. Two different types of applications that are under the hood of Power Apps that essentially encapsulate the Power Platform. And the kind of nice thing about this, Ray, is it's not just on its own. From a data connector perspective, this is how they go ahead and connect to your data using over 200, I'm sure there's kind of over 300 kind of connectors now from a data connector perspective. But one of the things I really wanted to call out is that, of course, you can connect to Dynamics 365, you can connect to Office 365, but you can also connect to on-prem databases as well. When I talk to customers, it's so important. You're going on a journey of digital transformation. You're not just going to just appear in the cloud overnight after you've gone to sleep. It's a journey, and often, whilst we idealize having one single data source, that's not the reality. So by using the different connectors, by using on-prem connectors, what it allows organizations to do is it allows them to transition so easily from on-prem to the cloud using the Power Platform. And that's an amazing thing, and that is such an integral part of the journey. Also, the kind of final point that I really wanted to talk about Dynamics 365 is your users don't really care much about what technology you're actually using. They just want to do their job. But the awesome thing about this, from our side of things, from people who are actually creating this digital transformation journey, is that we want that data that they're actually creating within their job function. And you're going to have hundreds of people within your organization creating data on a daily basis. By subscribing to the Common Data Service, and underneath that, the Common Data Model, what you get is the ability to be able to automate and connect using the Power Platform. And if you're going to then use Dynamics 365 applications, they've got all of that data available to them. And you can truly start to create a connected environment for your journey within your organization. So what we really wanted to do today, we really wanted to call out kind of 6 core areas of Microsoft Flow. And we're going to be demonstrating a few of these just to kind of show you how they work, and we're going to be picking a few of them and talking in depth about them. We really, truly believe these are the special parts of Microsoft Flow. So just to cover the first 3, we've got approvals. Did you know that Microsoft Flow has an inbuilt approval feature? So over the past 8 years I've worked with customers, I've never come across any customer in any industry that does not have an approval process at all. And we've gone ahead and had to customize it and create a custom approval process, which is a pain. It's waste. What Microsoft Flow has is it has the ability to create an approval request to one or many people. Send that approval request to somebody who can receive it in a dashboard that's already an integral part of Microsoft Flow, where they can go ahead and approve it, reject it, or ask for more information. They can even receive that on their mobile. They can even do that right from their Outlook inbox. They don't even have to change the way they do their work, which is awesome. The second point is business process flows. Can I just have a show of hands who's heard of business process flows within the context of Microsoft Flow? A couple of you, great, because we're going to be demoing this today. So hopefully for the rest of you who didn't put your hand up, this is going to be an exciting part. So business process flows allow organizations to create a guided process within their app. Who doesn't? Who doesn't have a guided process No one just goes, okay, all of you users in the organization, you can go ahead and just do it however you want, I'm not looking. Absolutely not, of course. Right? You probably want to be able to do that, but it's not going to be possible. So what business process flows allow us to do is implement a guided process. And it doesn't just guide, it's actually dynamic. It can actually go ahead and branch based on dynamic data within whatever the user puts within that process. And you can even then make gates. Don't let the user continue until this field is complete or this data equals this. And you can truly start to guide a user. You're not micromanaging them. You're guiding them. And then lastly, from a mobile perspective, I've already talked about the approvals on mobile, but you've got the mobile app. You can go ahead and get notifications on that. You can go ahead and start flows directly from the application and even monitor your flows as well. Perhaps if they've failed, you can go ahead and have a look why. So just from those three, some really awesome things, right? Ken, do you want to just talk about the other three?
Sure. So when we introduce a transformative technology like Microsoft Flow to a broader audience, there's naturally some angst around what are these data sources that these people are going to connect to? Do they understand the implications of data leaking throughout the organization? What may seem as very trivial could actually be very important to security departments. And so what exists inside of the platform is something called data loss prevention. Now this is different than your Office 365 data loss prevention. This is specific to Flow. And what it allows you to do is to create two essentially buckets, a business data bucket and a non-business data bucket. You can then associate connectors into one of these two buckets. Now, connectors are allowed to communicate with each other within the same bucket, but they're not allowed to actually cross buckets. So a common pattern would be to put all of your Office 365, Azure, and Microsoft-related business connectors in that business data, and then all of your consumer-based services connectors in the non-business data. And that would prevent the most concerning scenario for many organizations of leaking all of your SharePoint data out to Twitter. That would prevent that from happening. So that's a feature that exists inside of Microsoft Flow. The next one we want to talk about is a fairly new feature, and it's called the geofence trigger. And this is the ability to establish a geofence around a specific location, and whenever someone enters or exits that location, a flow is going to be instantiated. So that obviously creates a lot of opportunities for logistics scenarios, or just letting your spouse know that you're leaving work. Your choice. The last one we're going to talk about is solution packaging. Now, we've heard this term CDS, the Common Data Service. This is the same data platform that supports Dynamics 365, Flow approvals, Power Apps, and then other custom entities. Now, naturally, when you want to actually go ahead and build out a solution, you want to be able to package all of those different assets in a single deployable unit and be able to move it from your test environment to your production environment. So here, I know there's a lot of consultants here, there's probably some ISVs. This becomes a very important feature for you to build on top of the platform. And Sarah's actually going to walk us through how you go ahead and do that today.
So I'm just going to go ahead. So I'm just currently in my maker experience at the moment in Power Apps. And I've clicked on solutions. And you can see that I've got quite a few solutions here, right? So the one that I'm going to be going into one that I made earlier is my Integrate 2019 solution. But you'd go ahead and create this yourself, where you want to be able to create a solution to hold all of your components. And you can see in this one here, so I've got a few different things here. At the moment, I've got a report, I've got a Canvas app, I've got a dashboard, and I've got a flow process as well. But what you can actually do, if I just go ahead and click New, I can go ahead and build from here. Now, this is very common for those who are coming from the Dynamics 365 space, to go ahead and create a solution and build off that solution. You would never really go into just a kind of your own environment, your entire organizational environment, and start building. It's kind of classed as bad practice from a Dynamics 365 perspective. And really, it's not that it's bad practice is quite a subjective word. It's just a way to be able to make sure you're creating items and you know where they are. Okay, how many times do you lose your keys and do you lose things? It's crazy, right? And it's the same thing for any report that you create in this massive environment. You can go ahead and lose it quite quickly. Solutions allow for you to keep things in one place. And I can go ahead and start building off my solution here. And I appreciate that sometimes you're going to create things in other areas of the system. So if you've already created it, you can go ahead and add something that already exists into a solution ready for deployment in another environment as well. So we've got our solution, right? We want to move it from one environment to another. So how do we do this? I'm going to go ahead and click export. And we're just going to be taken through just a few prompts. One of the things I wanted to call out is this check for issues. Now, the Flow team have done a brilliant job here because what they allow, Flow and Power Apps team, what they've done is they've created a checker across Power Apps, across Flow, and across apps as a whole to say, hey, if you run it, we'll actually check your component against some common performance issues or some of the best practices that we think that you should be doing as a maker. And you can go ahead and run that, and you can get some suggestions on how to actually change the way you've done some of the things within your solution. So I'm not going to run that because, again, I appreciate that we're stood between you and drinks right now. So we're just going to go ahead and click next. And the second prompt is, hey, do you want to export this as a managed solution or an unmanaged solution? I'm not going to get in an argument between these because they're perfectly valid areas and points to be able to use solutions. But just as a bit of an overview, a managed solution locks all of those components down. They mean that when I put this into my production environment, I can't edit them. Compared to an unmanaged solution, which just pretty much throws it in and you can do whatever you want with. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a managed solution at the moment. And what that's going to do, that's going to export a zip file for me. And once it's done that, I'm going to then go ahead and change my environments, and I'm going to then go ahead and import it. Now, the important thing here as well is from an environment perspective, and you'll see this shortly once it's exported, is when we change our environments, this is similar from an Azure perspective, how you change your subscription or your resource groups. So within the maker experience, I'm going to have available to me, if my security permits, different environments. So you can see that I've got a sandbox here and I've got a production. I'm just going to go ahead and switch to my production instance. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, go to solutions, but instead I'm going to click and import. And I'm just going to go ahead and select the zip file that just downloaded. And that's going to, fingers crossed, go in perfectly fine. When I've done some dry run-throughs, this has generally gone through fine, but we all know how demos go when all of these people are watching you. So what I should be then seeing, I should actually get a warning on my flow. Should get like a nice little yellow bar. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for working. So what that's actually saying is it's saying, hey, Sarah, that's actually been successful. You've actually imported that solution. If I just refresh this, you'll be able to see this solution in my new environment. You can see it just there. And I'm just going to go ahead and just show you that the components have actually worked. All 4 components are there. And you can see that yellow bar at the top. That's what I was referring to when I was talking about managed solutions. It's actually said, hey, by the way, you can't actually edit these directly. Now, I just want to show you what that yellow warning meant when I imported it. So what Flow does is when you import it into another environment, it actually does it it imports it in a disabled state. It's basically off. It's not running. You can see that off on the top right. And also, in addition to that, it's actually not authenticated with some of the connectors that I've got. From my standpoint, as someone who manages deployments, that's a good thing. From a security standpoint, I want to make sure that the people doing the deployment have got the right access and the right security to be able to go ahead and do those deployments. So you can see that exclamation mark there. It's basically saying, we don't know what connector that you want to use in this environment. It's a different connector in different environments. So what Kent was saying with the actual policies between the connectors, this is really important from a security perspective. And also, for those of you who do deployments, smoke testing is essential. So this really does actually try and educate and try to push people to say, okay, we appreciate you've done a deployment. You do need to go ahead and just make sure your checks and balances are correct when you do so. So pretty much I would just need to, if I was doing this deployment now, I would just need to go ahead and validate all of those connections within that. Obviously, once it's done, I wouldn't need to do that again. So let's just go back to our slides. And I just wanted to summarize really what we've done. So from a solution perspective, really, in a nutshell, it's an amazing way to take many components, essentially your deployment. So this isn't just Flow. This is an app, this is a model-driven app, this is a Canvas app, this is a dashboard, this is a report, so many different things. and be able to take them and put them in another environment. And the next thing that we wanted to talk about is business process flows. So I mentioned those in the introduction, how important they are. And we really wanted to, especially considering not many of you have actually used them, I think this will be really valuable to you. We really wanted to be able to show you what they look like from a user perspective, but also actually look at building them and how easy it is to actually build them in Flow. So let me just escape out of that again. And let's go into, so I'm currently in Dynamics 365, and we can see here that I've got my opportunities. This is an opportunity in the sales app. And you'll see here that you've got the business process flow right at the top here in red. And you can see that it's been, how long it's been running. It's been running for a few hours. And we can see exactly where we are in this business process flow. We can see all of the stage names. You can name them however you want based on your business and your organization. And if I click into them, you can see that you've actually got steps. So from a user perspective, I can see what data is needed to progress this opportunity. Of course, you've got your form with all your fields and all your referential data that's still important to me from an opportunity perspective, if I need to review some of that information. But if I want to progress this to the next stage, I know what data I specifically need from an organizational perspective and what the organization or what my manager perhaps expects of me. And also from a best practice perspective, perhaps your organization actually has some process or some checks that needs to happen. A common one here is actually when you first capture a lead, a credit check is often required of organizations before they even consider them as an opportunity. And this is one that could be in a business process flow, is have you done a credit check or have you spoke to the accounts department to do a credit check? And that's pretty important, right? So, and you can go ahead and I can just put some data in here and just go ahead and keep progressing. Now, from a user perspective, I don't need to know what's going on under the hood there. I don't need to know if something's kicked off, like some automation is kicked off underneath. Ultimately, I'm going to be following this process. But I can still do what I want. I can still ignore it if I want to, unless I get prompted that some data is required. And that'll show to me in the business process flow. So let's have a look to see what this actually looks like from a designer experience. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and just open this exact same business process flow. So you can see that this is the business process flow designer, and it's a drag and drop designer. And we can see under the hood here, so if I go ahead and just click details, you can see how those stages are reflected in the designer, and also then each field is actually reflected. Now what I just want to do is I just want to go ahead and save a copy of this, because I just want to make some edits. And then I'm just going to show you how easy it is to just modify them. So we can see that. That's our new one. And I'm just going to go ahead and just delete this one. And you've got lots of different things you can go ahead and do very, very, very quickly. It's quite an advanced designer. And you can see on the right-hand side, I can just go ahead and push over a new stage. One of the kind of things that is actually really nice, and again, I mentioned as a user, it's not important what's actually happening within a logic perspective. I can go ahead and put a new condition on here before I even do another stage. So perhaps from an opportunity perspective, if an opportunity is perhaps over a certain value, maybe you need to route it to a different department, or perhaps it needs to go to finance first, or it needs to go for an approval. So I can go ahead and do that. I can just, let's just say value condition. And I'm just going to say the estimated revenue. And I'm going to apply that condition now. And I can then go ahead and add two different stages. So what would happen from a user experience perspective is if that estimated revenue, so as a user, I've just put how much that opportunity is worth, it's going to route me in what I need as a user. Whether I need approval for something over a certain value, it's going to prompt me for that approval. Whereas if it's not over that value, I don't need it. But I don't need to know that that's the functionality. All I'm going to do is follow the actual process. And then in addition to that, if I want to start to create an actual gated process, I can start to mark fields as required. When I start doing that, I start putting gates on my process. It allows me to create that gated process as an organization, because sometimes we have data that is essential. Everyone should have data governance policies. especially when you're even checking data. We all know GDPR, and we all know how important it is to be able to make sure data is accurate, kept up to date. This could just be as simple as have you checked the contact information for the person that you're dealing with? Because you want to actually enforce that behavior within your organization. I don't really like using the word enforce, to be honest, but sometimes by embedding it into these applications, in this technology, you're doing it quite subtly, if that's a word. Sometimes like kind of my British accent doesn't quite work with some words. But that's how you actually create that gated process. And then finally, I just wanted to point out the ability to go ahead and add automation to this business process flow. So I can go ahead and actually add workflows when a user goes to the next stage or even clicks previous stage. I can actually kick off automation in the back end. And then I can go ahead and also add a flow step here as well. So if I was to go ahead and add one, it will go ahead and get all of the flows that I've got access to within my environment, and I can apply that flow there. So from a user perspective, I can actually go ahead and just click a button and start a flow directly from a business process flow. And what that can do is, we talk about approvals, right? We talked about approvals in the intro. I can go ahead and say, maybe when I'm at a certain stage in an opportunity, go ahead and request approval. And I just need to click a button. And it can change a status, say, right, you've requested it. Kent can get an actual notification on his mobile to say Sarah's actually needs some approval for this opportunity. And we can do that using business process flows. And in addition to that, and finally, you don't have to just kick it off manually. You can hook flow up on change of fields and on change of this record to actually work in the background as well based on the common data service for apps. So you can have that manual trigger and you can have that automated trigger as well on top of a business process flow that guides the user through a process based on your organizational needs. So that's it from the demo perspective. Let's just go back and go straight into DLP with Kent.
So yeah, we touched on this a little bit, data loss prevention policies, and this provides us the opportunity to do that segregation. So here in the top right-hand corner, that is the screenshot of the Flow admin console or admin center. And basically that represents the business data bucket at the top. What's not shown would be the non-business data, and you have the ability to obviously visualize all of those connectors that show up and then move them across each bucket. So that would include like Microsoft first-party connectors, third-party connectors, even your own custom connectors that you've deployed within your environment itself. In addition, we do have admin analytics, which is shown here. This will give you some insight in terms of how many flows have been created, how many flow runs that you've experienced within an environment, how many flows have been shared. So this helps you identify who your champions are within your organization so that you can actually empower them and actually allow them to do more. There's also a connector usage. That's a commonly requested feature where people want to understand what are the connectors being used within their organization. And then there's also an errors analytics. So if you're afraid that your sort of citizen developer is going to create these runaway flows and burn up all of your flow runs, you have the ability to look at that as well. In addition, there's management connectors that exist that allow you to automate your governance. So for example, if you are not happy about a user creating a flow with a specific action, you could actually go ahead, detect that, run it through an approval, disable that flow if you wanted to. And then similar to what we saw earlier, Divya showed templates inside of Logic Apps. There's also a template gallery for Flow. So this is a combination of Microsoft provided templates, partners who develop connectors will provide templates, and then the community also has the ability to submit templates to be reused across other customers and partners. Next up, what we want to talk about is the Flow mobile device, or Flow mobile app rather, and in addition to that, geotagging, which is also part of the Flow mobile app. Now, the Flow mobile app allows you to do several different functions. You can create a new flow. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it is technically possible. You have the ability to receive push notifications. So within a flow, whenever a specific event happens, you can get a push notification. Buttons, and I'm going to show you a screenshot of that experience here where you on demand can click a button, a virtual button, and it'll actually light up your flow for you. The ability to respond to approvals, monitor your flow activity, And then also this can be rehosted in some other experiences as well. So here's a few screenshots. This was taken from my device on the far left. These are those virtual buttons that you basically can go ahead and click. You can provide inputs, whether it be drop downs of free text, and actually inject those data attributes into your flow itself. The bottom left, it says leadership app send notification. In this case, what I've actually done is we have a power app that we used at a corporate event, and we wanted the ability to push notifications to everyone who had that app. By using the Flow mobile, I can actually just provide some very simple messages and click that button, and actually everyone that has the Power app will receive that message. In the middle is the activity feed, so if you ever wanted to know, when is the last time a specific flow ran, you would have that visibility. And then on the far right, we have the approvals. So now I have the ability to respond to an approval. I'll get a push notification when one requires my attention, and I have the ability to approve or reject, provide additional feedback, and basically allows me to be on the go and be able to respond to these requests. Next up is the geofence trigger. And with this experience, we have a trigger, and on the button, it's going to say edit trigger region. And when you click on that button, you're going to get this map-based experience here. So you can go in, and it's essentially a search against Bing and provide an address. And then you have the ability to choose the diameter of that geofence that you want. And then what will happen is whenever with the Flow mobile app you enter or exit that region, you will actually get a flow instantiated, and you have the ability to include the data, metadata around that. So that could be the current latitude, longitude, etc. So in this case, it's a very simple sample where I'm just sending out a push notification. But you can imagine if you were in a logistics company and you were wanting to charge perhaps your customer while you're waiting on their loading dock, you would have the ability to integrate that with, say, Dynamics 365 and be able to track all of that information.
And it comes down to what's right for your organization. We appreciate there's so much technology out there. It's one of those things from an organizational perspective, you know your organization best. You know their culture, you know how they would be able to manage and maintain technology. And for us, it's about the people within that. How can you empower your organization and those people to be able to actually make a difference with the technology and achieve your business goals as well as your own goals? Obviously, you've got productivity goals, completely appreciate that. I mean, I've got flows that are set up when I flag an email, go ahead and add a new planner task. That increases my productivity because I know that flagging an email does nothing for me. I'm going to forget it. Whereas I live in planner. That's my personal productivity. But from an organizational perspective, what are your goals? And you can then go ahead and work backwards from that. Who's involved in achieving those goals? What are their roles? What technology would work for them? We appreciate not everyone's a developer. And we appreciate perhaps there's not the investment there to make everyone a developer. So this is where Microsoft Flow can really be unique and enable organizations to do that. And it's not just a case, Kent's doing a session tomorrow, and we've got a shameless plug for that at the end, but Kent's doing a session in the fact that it doesn't just have to be Flow or Logic Apps or something else or something else. Ultimately, it's about what technology you want to invest in as an organization. It's not an either or. When I was learning development like 5 years ago, we're always like, shall I learn C#? Shall I learn Java? Shall I learn Python? And it's really paralyzing, and it's the same thing for organizations. Organizations are almost in paralysis because they're like, crap, I don't want to make the wrong decision. But ultimately, have the conversation with your organization and with yourselves. What technology is going to be best? Because ultimately, just because you go ahead and use Logic Apps doesn't mean you can't use Flow. Just because you use Azure Functions doesn't mean you can't use something else. Whereas I think as human beings, we put these restrictions on us. And one of our messages from our session today was we really want it to be, ask the question yourself, what's right for your organization?
Now, one of the commonly, asked questions around Flow is the licensing model. And there's been some recent changes as well, so we figured it was worth highlighting. Now, the first tier is essentially the free tier. So this is something that anyone can sign up for, whether it's your Hotmail account or your Gmail account, or some of the lighter Office 365 plans like F1. And this provides you the ability to get some initial consumption. You have 750 runs per month. with data checks every 15 minutes. So if you're looking for that, on-demand type processing, this is probably not the plan for you. In addition, there's some limitations around sharing and approvals as well, because you don't necessarily have a CDS instance for them to be stored. Then we'll get into the most popular plan, and this is Office 365. So this would be Business Essentials, Premium, E1, 3, and 5. So I would imagine most people in this room have some level of entitlement through Office 365. And this often comes as a surprise for people because this is something that you can go back to your organization and start building on immediately. And it is still a very healthy entitlement where every user gets 2,000 runs per month and data checks every 5 minutes. Now, what is also interesting about this is all of those runs, that capacity gets pooled at the tenant. So if you have someone that's not using any of their flows, that means those flow runs are available for others to consume as well. Now, there's been some recent changes around Flow Plan 1 and what you can do with it. Previously, you had the ability to create custom connectors in that plan. You had the ability to use the on-premise data gateway and also the HTTP action. So those have recently moved into what's called Flow Plan 1. So this is either a standalone license that you're paying or subscribing to through your enterprise agreement. And this gives you additional runs, so 4,500 runs per month. You have 3-minute data checks, and this also gives you the ability to use HTTP, custom connectors, the on-premise data gateway. There's another add-on, Flow Plan 2, which historically has been used for administrators, but that isn't just the case anymore. So in addition to analytics, which I showed you that screenshot of, you also have the ability to create those BPFs, those business process flows. Now, what may not be broadly known is that the engineering and PM team that build and sustain business process flows, they're now part of the Flow team itself. So what you're going to start to see is more convergence from those two technologies as they work together. In addition, you also have the ability to access the Common Data Service, CDS, which is becoming more and more important as people try to build these enterprise applications on the Power Platform. And then lastly, if you have Dynamics 365 entitlement, you also have Flow entitlement as well. And this would allow you to essentially have all of Flow Plan 2 and below as part of that entitlement as well.
Just to add on that, which is kind of essential, is that you've got the ability to also call flows from Dynamics 365. So kind of any of the unified interface, you'll have the little button with the drop-down flow, and you can go ahead and actually call your flows. So it's such an embedded experience.
Yeah, with the entity in context as well, which becomes very, very powerful. And another scenario where in the past you may have written a CRM plugin to do a lot of that work and actually written low-level code, whereas now you are creating that opportunity for more people to actually be able to do that and set that up and saying, hey, whenever there's an account signed to me, send me a push notification. Those are simple things that can be done in minutes now as opposed to writing code. So this is our last slide, or I guess our second last slide, but we just wanted to provide you with some key takeaways. And I think the big message we're trying to share here is that this is a collaborative technology. And whether you're an Office 365, D365, or Power Apps customer, Flow creates that opportunity to provide some automation, some business process automation. We showed you business process flows, which was new for most of you. And I think these are very important. I think when you look into the enterprise, they're always looking for how do we have structured business processes? And then naturally, how do we streamline those business processes? And that's how we have the ability to govern those or govern the business process, but it also allows for a lot of consistency, which is what every business is looking for. And then lastly, we talked about approvals. And like them or not, they are a mainstay inside of every single enterprise. But using Microsoft Flow allows for a very streamlined experience to actually create approvals with contextual, say, documents or entities in scope, and then have them disseminated across your organization very efficiently, whether you're in your inbox, whether you're in Microsoft Teams, or whether you're on your Flow mobile application.
Thanks. And this is the fact that collaborative technology that Kent just referred to leads to collaborative success. Kent and I 100% believe this, and we live by it. We've talked about having that talk with your organization. That licensing slide, while I appreciate can be challenging to get your head around, and the slides are going to be distributed, so don't worry if you didn't manage to get a picture of it. is the fact that hopefully you realise that the majority of people in here will probably be able to go back now and have a look at Flow and actually be able to use it and trial it, because it's actually going to be part of your Office 365 licensing already. But the idea is the fact that it actually encourages, that technology encourages working together. It's not about individual success anymore. It's not about patting yourself on the back and saying, I've done a good job. You can still do that, for sure. But ultimately, you only get to share that success. It's much better shared as a team. And you can do so much more. There's only going to be so much you can do as an individual to be able to actually share that as a team. And to be able to provide that accessibility to your team that was perhaps otherwise unavailable with other technologies. Because ultimately, it's a bus. It's not just a bus for people who know how to do it anymore. You can actually get your entire organization on that bus and go on the journey. And you've got to have failures. Not every project's going to be successful. And Kent was referring to this earlier. We always start projects, and even just technology projects, don't have to be digital transformation projects, out with such positive intentions. And one thing can go wrong and everything falls apart. And before you know it, you're kind of like trying to cover your butt. But the thing is, if you're all on the bus, you can share that failure together, but you can also then go ahead, move past it, and then go ahead and actually achieve success that's shared, which is a bit more closer to reality. So hopefully that is the message that we leave you with today before we go on to the networking reception. So thank you so much for obviously the privilege of being able to talk to you all today. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. And we just wanted to do this shameless plug.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you've attended other Microsoft conferences, it's basically unavoidable to hear the question of Logic Apps or Flow, which one should I use? And no disrespect to the respective product groups, but depending upon which product group you ask that question to, you can probably guess what is the answer you're going to get. So tomorrow what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an objective look at Logic Apps and Flow, talk about some of the features, and then actually show you some real-world examples of how the organization I work for, Interpipeline, has figured this out. And I truly believe that there's room for both. And I think what I hope to do tomorrow is to convince you of that as well. So thank you for your attention. Enjoy the drinks. We'll be around to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Covey.co